Chapter 6. Nova was right. Nothing was the same after that day. We sat behind our palm in the courtyard for hours while he filled me in on all the details that would change my life forever and set into motion a chain of events that would change Hullaby Island forever. He recounted the confrontation with Gemma in the field when she hit me. That much I remembered, but the bizarre thing was how she suffered the same injury she inflicted upon me without me or anyone else ever laying a hand on her. I was at a loss for how this could be possible. But Nova had some theories of his own. He proceeded to fill my head with the fairy tales and legends of our island. I say fairy tales because surely I thought none of it could be true. But as I later learned, Nova was just beginning to open my eyes to the strange and wondrous world of the island I called home. Nova told me of the legend of Lux, and how Hullaby Island had once been a flourishing land of peace, equality, and harmony. Lux was so large and expansive that it dotted the entire coast of our island with its shimmering white stone buildings. Everyone was welcome in Lux, or anywhere on the island for that matter. There were no citizens or locals or orphans or grifts. All people were cast of the same cloth and were respected by each other. There were also tribal people on the island that lived a simple life, deep within the rainforest, and were said to have magical powers that they used for good. These powers helped to keep the peaceful balance among all things on the island. The pleasant people, the bountiful crops, the ideal weather, the docile animals, all were thanks to the indigenous Bedouin tribe that dwelled in the lush depths of our forest near the volcanic heart of Hullaby Island. Of course, as every fairy tale goes, things could not stay this good forever. A simple man named Raven would ultimately destroy this utopic paradise. He was a man who always needed more. He always wanted to be the best at everything. He was never satisfied by what he already had or where he'd already been. For Raven, contentment didn't exist. He first focused on building his muscles and sculpting his body into the perfect specimen that even the gods would admire. After achieving the perfect body, he decided he needed the perfect home. He picked a site at the highest cliff above all his neighbors. He spent years erecting his white stone palace. It was the largest home Lux had ever seen, and everyone came to admire it. Raven loved the attention and bathed in the power it made him feel. But still, he needed more. He set out to find himself a wife to live in this enormous white palace. Of course, not any woman would do. He was looking for the most beautiful woman on the island. And he was so arrogant in his quest that he abandoned the idea of loving his wife and held an audition to find her based solely on beauty. Women from everywhere flocked to Raven, hoping to be selected to be his wife. But Raven wasn't impressed. All the women looked the same to him. They were all tan with dark hair and dark eyes, just as he was, as was everyone on the island. He wanted to have something special that no one else had. They were all tall with dark hair and dark eyes, just as he was, and as was everyone on the island. He wanted to have something special that no one else had. On the third day of his auditions, he grew hopeless that he would ever find anyone that could be as beautiful and as perfect as he was, and he was about to settle on an athletic girl named Tonya when he saw her. Her name was Mora, and she was walking along the soft, sandy streets with her mother, carrying baskets of exotic fruit from the forest upon her golden blonde head. Raven had never seen something more beautiful than Mora and was instantly taken by her. He pushed through the crowd of women fawning over him and ran over to Mora and her mother. The hulking sight of this gigantic, muscular man running toward her frightened Mora, and she hid behind her mother when he approached. Raven tried to explain to Mora and her mother how lucky they were that he had spotted her from afar and instantly knew she was the perfect woman he was looking for to become his wife. This brought the Bedouin women to giggles, and they tried to ignore this obviously raving madman and continue down the street. But their laughter angered Raven, and he told them that he was the most desirable man in Lux and that Mora had to be given to him. At this time, Nevia, Mora's mother, spoke for the first time. She explained that she and her daughter lived in the forest with the Bedo people, and while they were flattered by Raven's admiration, they would both be returning home after they finished trading their fruit. Raven was stunned by Nevia's boldness to defy him, her daughter. He saw there was no use reasoning with the old Bedo mother, so he picked up Mora and threw her over his shoulder and ran up the hills to his home. Mora was terrified of Raven. She screamed for her mother the whole way to Raven's home. He tried to quiet her and convince her that she would be happy with him, but she only begged harder to be returned to her family. So the frustrated Raven locked her away for the night. Each day, he would try to win her over with lavish gifts and sweet words, but each day Mora grew more and more frightened. Nevia sat outside Raven's home every day chanting and pleading with him to release Mora, or she would have no choice but to summon the island gods for help. Raven grew desperate that someone, perhaps even the gods themselves, would eventually come and take Mora away. So one night, he took her from her room and led her out the back door of his palace. At first, Mora was elated. This was the first time she'd been outside in weeks. She stared up at the bright moonlit sky and drank in the beauty of the stars. Her flaxen blonde hair seemed to come to life in the moonlight, dancing across her slender shoulders and down her back. Raven grabbed her wrists and pleaded with her once more for her to love him. But when she turned her clear blue eyes away from him, he knew he would never win her. So he did the only thing he thought would guarantee that no other man could best him by winning Mora's heart. He threw her from the cliffs of his home into the dark, greedy sea. Mora's fateful scream awoke Nevia, and when she found out what Raven had done, she was inconsolable with fury and rage. She returned to the Bedo people and told her family of the grave misfortune that had befallen her beloved Mora. They were all shocked and devastated by the news, but none more so than her twin sister, Nessia. Nessia and Mora were identical twins, and she had always shared a special bond with her sister beyond their delicate pale skin, blue eyes, and blonde hair. Their connection was so deep that Nessia was said to have felt her sister's pain when Raven held her captive and finally killed her. She went to their tribe's leader and demanded that her sister be avenged. Jaka, the Bedo's leader, said that the only way to appease the gods and restore balance after Mora's death would be to sacrifice Raven to the volcano, and then everything would be forgiven and could start anew. But of course, Raven would not comply with such a thing, and secretly, Nessia was happy because she believed Raven deserved to suffer a death far worse than that. So, the Bedo people released a wrath upon Lux that had never been seen before. A war broke out between the people of Lux and the Bedo people. Although no one in Lux condoned what Raven had done to Mora, none of them would help the Bedos against Raven. The Bedos saw this as a traitorous act against their people and went after everyone in their way to avenge her death. The people of Lux had no choice but to fight back and fiercely defend their homes and families from the ruthless Bedo warriors that pillaged and burned their once beautiful city. Without the Bedo tribe using their powers for peace on the island, things quickly changed. There were divisions between the populations. The weather turned turbulent. The citizens of Lux began to take notice of the treacherous wildlife that surrounded them. The regal tar cats they once had revered became savage, bloodthirsty beasts. The indigenous plants of the island swiftly overtook the crops, and the hostile waters made it impossible to fish or trade by sea. For 4 years, Hullaby Island was locked in this tumultuous battle that nearly destroyed all of Lux. It is said that Nessia made it her goal to find Raven and avenge her sister. She was fueled by such hatred that she became somewhat of a legend herself. She was feared by all because she no longer felt any allegiance to her people or those in Lux. She was ruthless and would kill anything that crossed her on her mission to destroy Raven. On her quest, she found herself spending a great deal of time in solitude, hiking the cliffs and mountainous shorelines of the island in search of Raven. One day she slipped and fell, injuring herself badly. She had lost all hope of rescue when suddenly a young man appeared. He approached her without fear, although he surely knew who she was from all the tribal attire and long blonde mane. He was wearing traditional white linen pants and shining gold cuffs, and he was clearly from Lux and not a friend. But he helped her nonetheless. Nessia was confused by his kindness, and she stared into his light blue eyes. The light in them reminded her of her sister, Mora, and the kindness and love she had always shown others. Hadn't her own eyes looked this same way not too long ago? She began to weep at the thought of how much Mora would have hated this bloody war being fought over her. Nessia began doubting her motives and spending more time with this man called Kai. She was stirred by the feeling she felt for this kind stranger that cared for her and nursed her injuries. She soon found she was in love with him, and him with her. And what's a fairy tale without forbidden love, after all? Nessia and Kai tried to hide their love at first, but found it impossible as the fighting escalated between Lux and the Beddoes. Secretly, they wed atop the cliffs where they met. They lived in blissful solitude far away from the fighting and started a family. It is said they had 2 daughters, one with hair as dark as the night sky, and the other with hair as white as the sandy shores. They represented the light and the dark, the heavens and the earth, the balance that Halabi needed to restore peace. Nessia went to the Beddoe leader, Jaka, and asked him if there was any way to stop the war, because she feared for her daughters, and she believed they might be the key to bringing peace back to the island, because they were created out of love between the Beddoes and Lux. Jaka was intrigued and asked to meet the daughters. He was shocked to find that they were as Nessia said, and more. He blessed them and said they were indeed proof that Lux and the Beddoes could live in peace once more. After meeting Nessia's unique daughters, Jaka said he would sacrifice himself to the gods so the island could be reborn. The Beddoe tribe begged for another way, but Jaka explained that his people would have all they needed in Nessia's daughters. They were light and dark, sun and moon, heavens and earth. They had the power to soothe the unrest and heal the island. And with this, he sacrificed himself to the volcano, and the rest is history. What do you mean the rest is history, Nova? I've heard parts of this story before from the locals, but if it were true, wouldn't we all be living in peace and harmony in beautiful seaside houses in Lux? It's nothing but an old folk tale.
That's just it, Tippy. It's not that old, and I'm not done yet. Do you want to hear the rest or not?
All right, but get on with it.
After Jaka sacrificed himself into the volcano, he set in motion what we refer to as the flood. He said the island would be reborn, but he neglected to say how. He said that those on the island who had become evil and poisoned by the war would be eliminated. That is what caused the rains, the winds, the lava, and the peril. Everything had to go so the land could be cleansed and start anew.
Yeah, but we didn't all die, did we? You're still here, and so am I.
Exactly.
I gave him an impatient look.
You see, we were the innocent. We survived the flood because we were meant to.
He paused for a moment, looking into my eyes, searching for more understanding than I could give him. He leaned forward and took my face in his hands and continued.
And some of us were meant to do even more.
He said, almost pleadingly. I was mesmerized by the way he gazed at me. I found myself drowning in his languid green eyes. I felt my mind spinning and my cheeks flushing. My heart quickened again, and I felt short of breath. Why did this keep happening to me? Damn Nova and his hold over me. I loved and hated it at the same time, and yet was so powerless against it. Nova released his hold of my face and my soul simultaneously.
Are you all right? You look flushed. Maybe this is enough for today. I've given you a lot to think about.
I shook my head. Oh no, all you've done is tell me some old fairy tale. None of this explained what happened between me and Gemma and why everyone but me has a name and why I, all of a sudden, have friends on my side. You need to do a little better than this.
Okay, I will. I promise. But it's getting late.
I looked around, and he was right. The shade from our palm had grown into a shadow that cloaked the courtyard in darkness. My time with Nova had slipped away too quickly, as usual. Nova, you missed flood work.
Let me worry about that, okay? Now, this is the deal. You remember how your window works?
I nodded. Finally, we were getting to the window.
Okay, tonight, and every night for that matter, at 11 sharp, you'll use the window and come meet me outside the center.
But how will I know when it's 11, Nova? And won't a grift see me?
Tippy, a little trust?
He smiled.
I'll call for you when it's 11, and I've taken care of the grifts. Just do as I say, and soon you'll have all the answers to your questions.